Well, welcome to another edition of Suzy's Las Vegas. My special guest today is Ken Walther, and we're doing a series. And on the last episode, we left Ken roaming around Africa, trying to unwind after a 2-year period of going through tribal genocide and hundreds of thousands dead and tragically maimed Africans. The reason for the mayhem was primarily over tribal and ethnic between two East African tribes, the Watusi and the Bahutu. I knew I was going to mess that one up. I asked listeners to ask me some questions about the show, and we did receive a few comments and questions. Okay, one person asked about medical, Ken. What happens if you have a major problem? This is important.
Yeah, there's when you're in a strange little place like Burundi, there's no hospitals that are suitable for Europeans. There was only one hospital in Bujumbura, and it was called the Prince Rwagasore Hospital. And it was named after the king, the old king's son, who actually went to study in Belgium and went in the Belgian military forces and became an officer. Then he came back and tried to take over the country. But at any rate, they named the hospital after him. Wow. So myself and my chief had to go down and check that hospital out to report on what was going on. And the hallways, they didn't really have a lot of beds and rooms. They had the hallways just lined with people who were laying there with open wounds and stuff from the machetes and the stuff that was being used to attack them.
Right.
And
wow.
So that's not really a hospital that we would use for the Europeans there.
Yeah.
And the atrocities were everywhere. And I'd like to mention one time I was looking out the window of the embassy, looking into the road in back of us, and I saw a Hutu woman carrying big things. They carry everything on their heads down there.
Do they really?
Yeah, big bags and sticks. Yeah. I don't know what all they carry, but
wow, they must be strong.
Very strong and
yeah.
good balance.
Yeah.
But the soldiers came up and knocked her to the ground and proceeded to cut her baby out. And that was pretty.
Oh my God!
Pretty disgusting to watch, but that's the depth of the depravity when you have a genocide going on like that. So I just had to mention that it was not a pretty sight, and the stuff going on there was not nice. But if an American or a European or whatever got sick, they would normally try and catch a flight to Europe and go. Well, Americans, we would try and go to Frankfurt, which had very good hospitals. The Frankfurt hospitals are pretty good. So the plane that came was only like once a week. It was called Sabina. Have you ever heard of Sabina? It's a Belgian airline.
Okay, is it still around?
I'm not sure, but we used to make fun of the name Sabena.
Yeah.
Was such a bad experience, never again. But we would still have to fly Sabina.
Okay.
We had two other choices down there, and that was no American Airlines came, but we had Air Zaire, which wasn't too bad, and then we had Aero Burundi. Aero Burundi used old military planes like C-47s, propeller prop things, and I had to take that on a few short hops, and there's everything on those planes. There's goats, chickens, everything. There's people barfing in the aisles. It's just a military plane with some seats in it.
Oh my God!
So Sabina seemed like Emirate Airlines compared to those people.
Oh my God!
So anyway, that's what would happen if we would go to Europe or to go to some medical things. Sometimes we could go to Nairobi. If I never got sick down there that I had to be evacuated from, but some people would go to Nairobi to get things done.
Wow.
And for dental, we would wait till we go to Germany and get whatever we had done.
Well, yeah, you want somebody that knows what the hell they're doing in plain words.
And one of the things down there, when there's an emergency, a lot of times the host country will stop all communications out of your major embassy with big antennas on the roof. They'll chop them or shoot them or something like that. So we had to have emergency communications. So one night, my chief said, we got to test this emergency gear. There's a thing called an RS-1. This piece of equipment was built during World War II, and it was 3 little boxes that could be interconnected together, and a hand crank generator, or you could plug it. There's a picture of the thing. There were 3 things: a receiver, a transmitter, and a power supply.
Wow.
The power supply, if you had any type of current, it would take any voltage anywhere in the world, had a plug that would adapt to anything. Very modern for that day.
Wow.
Because of necessity, it was modern. And there was a built-in key on one of those on the transmitter to send Morse code.
Oh, okay. So they still used Morse code
Yes, they did.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Morse code was used actually quite a bit during the Vietnam War. Why? Because the Chinese and the Vietnamese and the North Koreans were all using Morse code for their main form of communication. So when I was in the Army, we had to intercept their communications and direction find them, which means locate them, and so we could take them out. But so Morse code was used back when I first went to the military in *64. It's been used, since.
Is it still being used now?
Even now, we have ham radio clubs around the world, and they have one portion of their license you can get qualified in Morse. So I was sitting in the embassy one day, and this British guy came to the embassy and said, by any chance, do you have anyone at your embassy that knows Morse code? I said, well, I do. And he said, well, do you think you could help me get up to speed? Because his embassy wanted him to be able to communicate in Morse code also. So we spent a few days practicing. And Morse code's like a language. If you don't use a language for a long while, you lose it, but it'll come back quickly. He got back up to speed in a matter of days, so he was pretty good. So that's my story about the RS-1, except for the fact that one time the chief said, well, we're going to have to test it. So his house was probably about a mile or so from mine, so I waited till it was dark. I put all the stuff in a bag, and I started going down to his house at night. And I knew that the trucks, I could hear them coming, straining to come up the hill that I lived on. And I figured that if the trucks would come close, I could just duck into a bush, and they would go on past me. So that was the plan. So I went, with no interference, I went down to my chief's house, and we got this transmitter hooked up. And for an antenna, for any of you hams or operators out there, I used a long wire antenna and hooked to the screen windows on his house.
Okay.
And that was enough to work the distance of 1,500 miles, line of sight, from Bujumbura to Asmara, Ethiopia, on 10 watts, a 10-watt transmitter called RS-1. So if you want to look up RS-1s, they're still, you could buy one. I mean, they're a tube radio, but they're pretty hefty. So anyway, that's my story on the RS-1 for agent communications. It was used throughout our history. And
That's
so
amazing.
Morse code is still used. I still like Morse code. Morse code is so effective because in HF frequencies, like around 5, 6 to 10 megahertz, its signal will go and bounce off the ionosphere and come back down to wherever your location is, hopefully.
Wow.
And so, anyway, if there's any ham radio people out there that have any questions or so on.
What is it, over in Henderson? I think you have.
Sun City Anthem.
Yeah, there's
a
club.
ARRL Ham Radio Club. And so they're still out there. They're going to be our backbone communications. Now, they use very sophisticated equipment nowadays. They can transmit, even interface with the internet, and they can also work VHF and UHF and HF. Those are different levels of frequencies of communications.
Wow.
But HF works good. It's a lower frequency than the others. But anyway, we won't bore people who aren't interested in radios with that stuff.
No, but it is interesting to touch on. Now, I'd like to find out how many ham radio operators are out there.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, share, Suzy's Las Vegas. Ken and I want to know.
Yeah.
So at least send us a comment. Let us know if you're out there.
We'll get in later to some of the different types of clandestine communications that we did, which might be of interest to people. So keep in touch.
Oh, wow. Well, let's get back to it. Tell us about your hunting trips, Ken, And where did you get the meat for on your table? I don't know. Maybe I want to know this. Maybe I don't want to know this.
Well, it was, as I mentioned, there weren't any real grocery stores down there, no Albertsons or anything.
No,
So if we wanted fresh meat, we had to go out and get it.
Okay.
And there were some chickens down there that were being raised by the locals, and that was always good. They were a little tough, but they were good.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, a British friend of mine, he worked for British Petroleum, BP, they came to the house and said, "Ken, would you help me be my backup? We're going to go hunting. He's going to go hunting Cape buffalo." Well, I'd never hunted a Cape buffalo in my life. A deer is bad enough for me.
Yeah.
So I said, sure. And so he had what they called a 308 Mannlicher Steyr bolt-action rifle that held 5 rounds. And it's a pretty hefty round. It's kind of like nearly like a 7.62, but it has a very long projectile. And so I said, yeah, I'll go, but all I have is a double-barreled side-by-side shotgun that I can use. I can't use the embassy's Browning shotguns or anything. They said, okay. So Ted was a pretty good hunter. I wonder if we can bring up a picture of a blonde-headed guy sitting by a dead buffalo.
Okay.
There's me in a hat there.
That's you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Looks a little different.
Yeah.
There's Ted. He was quite
Ted.
a guy.
Wow.
And but he was a professional hunter, compared to me. And
There the two of you are, huh?
yeah.
Wow.
So I agreed to go with Ted, and he said, "You're going to be my backup. You're going to carry your side-by-side shotgun. And if he can't drop this big buffalo that's charging, Cape buffalo charge with their heads up, and they're watching you, and then just before they get to you, they drop their head and smash you into a tree and trample you and gore you and all that stuff."
Wow.
So I was to be his backup with my shotgun, and I had a solid slug in one chamber or in one barrel, and a buckshot in the other.
Okay.
And the object was a solid slug is it's a ball round that's about 50 caliber, and it's pretty hefty, and so when it hits something, it's pretty powerful.
Wow.
For close ranges.
Yeah.
And the other round is going to be buckshot, which he said if he can't drop it and it keeps coming, shoot that, because the buckshot into his face he might not be able to see us.
Wow.
So that was the plan. So we went up to this area where there was a little, I don't even know if these people they might have been the Twa people. There's another group up there.
Oh, there's a third. Okay.
Yeah.
So now the first one is that, okay.
Watusi, the
Watusi.
Hutu, and the Twa, TWA.
Okay, so now we've
Not
introduced
Trans World
a third.
Airline.
Now we've introduced 3 groups.
Yeah. So went to the chief, and we gave him a case of Primus beer, which we talked about before. It's a great beer down there.
Yeah.
And some cash.
Well,
and
that always cash works.
Oh, he was happy. He said, "You can hunt anywhere that's in my area," which was not like Jesse Waters, but anywhere out there. So we said that's a good idea. So we went, started out, and we had a lot of natives following us because they wanted to get what we shot. They wanted some food, and that's fine. And they carried some of our stuff too. So we were onto this little troop of about 5 buff, and the first day we couldn't catch up to them, and we knew about where they were, so we were going to overnight and get up early in the morning and go get them again.
Okay.
So overnighting, there was a little small clearing with a mud hut with a thatched roof, grass roof, and
that was your bar. You went to the bar while you waited for the next morning. No.
No, that was just out in the middle of nowhere. That was.
I tried.
Yeah, I wish there was a bar, but we did bring our beer with us.
Yeah. So you had your own bar with you.
Yeah. And we had some rations with us.
Okay.
So my friend who worked for British Petroleum, they sold a thing called Shell Tox, which is an anti-bug spray. So he says, "Well, I know what we're going to do." He says, "They said we could sleep in this nice shelter, this hut on a dirt floor with thatched roof." And he says, "I'm going to fog it. I'm going to use 2 cans of Shell Tox, and we're going to fog this place up so that we get rid of all the things in there,
mosquitoes and the scorpions and all that.
All the weird things."
Yeah.
And so I said, "That sounds good." So he set off his foggers, and we sat outside and had a little food, and we're talking to the people. And then his Swahili was pretty good. Mine was just very, very rudimentary.
Yeah.
So anyway, after an hour or so, he said, well, we might as well go to bed. And we took our sleeping bags and put them in there, got in our bags and zipped them up.
Wow.
And it was no light or anything. We heard this plink, 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 things falling down on us.
Was it on
And
the dead bugs?
all the things that were up and safely hidden in the straw that wouldn't have bothered the natives or anything in there, but we were so smart that we're going to do it. So they're all dying, and they're coming down and falling on us. We figured this is not a good idea.
Oh, God.
So we went back out to sleep in the open.
Yeah.
And that was fine. It was no rain or anything going on. And so we're just about to doze off a little bit, and he heard this crazy sound. We heard this sound. It was something I'd never heard before. It was a leopard coughing and growling, prowling around the area.
He was getting ready to come visit you guys,
I
right?
don't know how far away he was, but he could. And the natives, of course, heard him too. And so they're sitting up with they had real spears, not like my Zamus. These were real spears. And so we kind of waited and thought, well, what are we going to do? So we just had our weapons cradled while we were sleeping in case the thing did come in to try and snack on us. So,
Yeah.
but nothing happened. So that was a little unnerving at first. So we got up when the sun came up and got our stuff ready and started out on the trail. Well,
Okay.
for quite a while, nothing was evident. The trackers couldn't spot them yet, but the natives were very hungry and a little bit nerved. So they said, "We need to get something. Can you shoot anything for us?" So Ted spotted a little stream. There's a little hippo,
Okay.
and so that's not a good thing to shoot because it's just not game. It's just so it was food.
Mm-hmm.
So he dropped this hippo, and the natives were on him and got everything down to just stick-sized bites practically, and they hauled him away. And they were happy because they had food to take back to their families. And so then we continued our hunt, and we saw the tribe. It was kind of like off in a little gully, and there was a thing called papyrus trees. That's what they make parchment out of in Egypt and stuff. But these are just bushes with long leaves on them. Mm-hmm. And we saw him down in there, so Ted says, "Hey, I'm going to go around." There's a clearing. He says, "I'm going to go around on that side, and you stay on this side, and then we'll see if we can drive them where they're going to come out." And I said, "Okay, I'll wait here." So I'm waiting with my shotgun. I'd loaded right now 250 caliber or solids in the barrels, and I can't even see him. I don't know where the heck he's at. So I saw this big head come out of the reeds, and he was just standing there, and he was just looking around, sniffing the air. It's about 40 meters. And so I had a good sight picture on him of what they call a heart-lung shot, which is where you want to shoot something.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to try it. And I figured maybe he'll come and rescue me. So I fired off a round, and his head went back. And then he ran. And these things are powerful. They're like a locomotive. So Ted comes screaming out there and says, "What did you do? You ran off the game. Why did you shoot?" And I said, "Well, I had a perfect shot." He said, "You didn't hit him. You didn't do it." And I said, "Yeah, I did." Meanwhile, a native ran down to the bushes, and he rubs his hand and he says, "Bwana Mbigombogo." He said in Swahili, he shot, and he had what they call frothy blood on his hands, which means it was a lung shot, which is what you want.
Wow.
So then Ted, big white hunter, he came up and said, "Okay, you drew first blood, you follow him." So here I am with my shotgun, following a path that this big thing had run through the jungle and knocking down little trees and stuff. That seemed like forever. And finally a native went up a tree and said, "He's right over around the next bend." And Ted said, "Okay, go get him." And so I said, "All right." So I'm walking around with my shotgun, and I heard this big moan, and I thought, "He's not dead." And he said, "No, that was his death moan, mate." And I said, "Yeah?" I said, "Okay." So I went around the next bend, and there the animal was laying on the ground, And I was ready to shoot him again, and actually could see the light go out of his eyes.
Really?
Yeah.
And he died?
Yeah. Yeah, so Ted came up and he says, "Do you realize what you've done, mate?" And I said, "No, what'd I do?" He said, "You shot a buffalo with a single shot from a 12-gauge shotgun."
Oh, my goodness.
And so I didn't really think much of it, but then later I found out that's not something that happens every day.
No.
So that's my story on the buffalo.
Right there.
Yeah. And there's my little shotgun.
Wow.
Now, once they started hacking this guy up, their dogs, which we would consider wild dogs, came in and ate everything up, including the blood. And the natives had all of the meat on sticks, and they're taking it back to their homes. And I wanted the head for a trophy, and Ted and I split the fillets because those are really good meat.
Yeah.
And they're big.
Are they?
Yeah, big fillets. They're all the whole back muscle.
Oh, wow.
So we only wanted to we cut the tongue out for the chief that let us hunt there, and the testicles, because that's a hell of a delicacy for him.
Okay.
So that's
better him than us. Thank you.
There you go. So anyway, I just wanted to tell about that little story because it's kind of exciting, and it's something that I hadn't done before.
Yeah.
So that was the story on that.
Wow. Okay, Ken, that sounds really interesting.
Now, we still got some time.
Yeah.
The people down there, like I say, the natives, the Hutus, they don't have any grudges against anybody. The Twa weren't really involved in the genocides. They were just kind of exempt, I guess. Besides, they were a very, very small minority.
Okay.
So
they went along with everybody, is what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah, they just wanted to be left alone, and they were out in the bush and so on.
Yeah.
So that was the story of the different tribes there. And the longer one stays in Africa, the more they realize how big and beautiful Africa is. It's wild. It is. It's gorgeous. It can be a little savage.
Yeah.
But if anyone hasn't been to Africa, they should go. And now especially, they're very accommodating to tourism. They've gone through their rough spells, and you've seen.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I would go back in a heartbeat. I swear to God. It's beautiful.
It is. There's such a variety of things to do.
Yeah.
And so the picture we had of Mishambero, the president, if we could put him back up for a second.
Yeah.
He was also studied military arts in Belgium. He came back and he took over. And the king was still out there. He was in exile. After they had Uhuru, which is freedom, from 62 to 65, a lot of the kingdoms and stuff broke up, and also the people who were colonizers down there, the Brits and the Belgians and so on, turned it over to their regular governments. But Mishambero, well, he was a pretty tough little guy. He was, as I mentioned, he was a short Tutsi, but he ruled with an iron hand. Mm-hmm. And they had his picture above every commercial establishment in town to glorify that he was a president and show how big he was.
Wow.
But when presidents are down in these places, they're normally called presidents for life.
Okay.
And that's an undefined term.
President for life.
Yeah, okay. Because that can be next week or it can be 10 years. So that's the thing for being a president for life. And he was later ran off. I think he escaped into Ethiopia, and he didn't actually die till about 83. But this was in the 70s. He ruled.
Well, then he survived for quite a while.
Yeah, he managed to get out. Yeah, he managed to get out of town.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing to it, as I mentioned before too. His brother was a big guy, Simbanania. He was a huge guy, and he liked to drink, and he liked to play pool. One of my friends had a pool table, so we would meet with him sometimes. And I mean, he was a cold-blooded killer. But you have to know all kinds of people when you're working overseas. If you just hang out with a choir group, you won't find the people.
I'm sure you got to know everybody there.
We try. So if anyone has any questions about these times too, be sure and let us know, because we're kind of working our way through these different type of episodes. And the next episodes that we're going to be coming up with are we're going to get the heck out of Africa, and we're going to go into Central and South America, and I'm going to start talking about spycraft. This is a book that details and lists all of the spy equipment that the agency built and deployed around the world. And started that from my next tour from Africa was going to be Panama. And from Panama, I worked into Central and South America and those places.
Wow.
And so stay tuned for the spycraft and technical area that's coming up.
Well, you know, Ken, if there's people out there that want to talk about it, maybe they were there around the same time you were. I mean, how cool would that be to be able to literally talk to people that were there like you, you know? I mean,
yeah, well, they'd have to be pretty old now.
Oh, you're not that old. Don't believe him. He's still young. Yeah.
So if there's anyone out there that's been in any of the intelligence community and had to use any of the spy gear, because we supported the military, we supported FBI, DEA, and so on. And so love to hear from some of the compatriots out there who used tradecraft as well as spy gear.
Right. Well, you know, we'd love to hear more from you, the audience out there. So be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And if you have questions or comments, be sure to leave them, because Ken and I are very into this, and we want to find out what you're thinking too, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that were out there, and you know, not everybody died over there. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are there, and maybe they're retired now, or they want to, you know, talk about what happened, and you know, you might run into people that you know, Ken.
Well, there might be some out there. I've heard there's a couple of spooks around the area. Okay. So most of my colleagues retired on the East Coast, and we call them Beltway bandits. They went to work for the
Beltway bandit.
They're the ones that work for the companies that we used to hire.
Okay.
The TRWs and the big tech companies and so on the East Coast. Some of them like to stay out in that area.
Yeah.
They came back as contractors.
Wow.
I decided Vegas was more my style, so
there you go. We'd be surprised how many people are probably still out there. Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. So again, you heard it here first. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And again, that's our show for today. And Ken was fabulous. And what's the next thing? Spycraft, huh?
We're going to talk about spycraft in Panama. Panama was a base that we worked out of to cover Central and South America.
Okay.
And the things that were going on in this time, which was still in the 70s, was narcotics. Narcotics was a big thing.
That's a big thing, like now.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
but,
I don't know
it was big then too, huh?
Yeah, the people saw Narcos out there. We can talk a little bit about Narcos.
Yeah.
Which was a Netflix episode.
Oh yeah, I watched that. I loved it. I'm into that. I really am.
Very good, because Escobar was a charming guy. I mean, everyone.
Did you ever meet him?
I never met him. It's a good thing, because he was not very fond of people working against his livelihood. So
yeah.
But I liked the episode myself.
Yeah. Well then, we need to find out who else you met that was famous.
Yeah, I know there's some DEA guys out there, and then some bureau guys that might have been involved with the counter narcotics work. So get in touch with us.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our show for today. And if you're interested in contributing to the show, be sure and send us a comment. We'll be sure and get back to you. Again, like, subscribe, and share. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Bye for now.
Adios.